In this video, we'll be looking at how we can improve our approximation of a truck's fuel economy when it has used a specific amount of fuel. In the last video, we started by looking at a truck driving on a hilly section of highway, and we focused on the amount of change in distance for each tenth of a gallon interval. We wanted to approximate the truck's fuel economy when it had used exactly 2/10 of a gallon of fuel. Our general method was to use average rate of fuel consumption over a tenth of a gallon interval to approximate instantaneous rate of fuel consumption right at 2/10 of a gallon. We computed average rates of fuel consumption over 1/10 of a gallon intervals right before and after the 2/10 of a gallon mark. Since we knew how the steepness of the road affected fuel economy, we were able to figure out that one of these average rates was an overestimate of the fuel economy at the 2/10 of a gallon mark, because the truck would have better fuel economy going downhill. And the other was an underestimate because the truck would have worse fuel economy when it was going uphill. So we knew that the instantaneous fuel economy at the 2/10 of a gallon mark would be between 36 miles per gallon and 48 miles per gallon. Our big question now is, how can we make a more precise approximation? It would be good for you to pause this video and think of a method to get a better approximation before watching more. A way to do this is to use smaller fuel intervals. Let's look at the truck's trip again, but this time break it down into 1/20 of a gallon fuel intervals. As before, let's see how each 1/20 of a gallon fuel interval corresponds to a distance interval. Let's look at the 2/10 of a gallon mark again. As we did with the 1/10 of a gallon intervals, we can find an average rate of fuel consumption over the interval right before the 2/10 of a gallon mark. Here, the average rate of fuel consumption is 3.3 miles per 1/20 of a gallon. That is equivalent to 66 miles per gallon. We can also approximate the truck's fuel economy right after the 2/10 of a gallon mark. Here, the average rate of fuel consumption is 1.9 miles per 1/20 of a gallon, which is equivalent to 38 miles per gallon. Next, we want to decide whether either of these approximations is an overestimate and whether either one is an underestimate. As before, near the 2/10 of a gallon mark, the road is becoming more flat, with a clear downhill for any interval right before the 2/10 of a gallon mark. Thus, the fuel economy of the truck is becoming less and less as the road flattens out. So any average rate over an interval before the 2/10 of a gallon must be an overestimate to the instantaneous fuel economy right at 2/10 of a gallon. This tells us that the truck's fuel economy right at the 2/10 of a gallon mark is less than 66 miles per gallon. Note that the road continues to go downhill as it slowly levels off past the 2/10 of a gallon mark. So an average rate over a 1/20 of a gallon interval right after the 2/10 of a gallon mark would underestimate the fuel consumption right at the 2/10 of a gallon mark. This is for 1/20 of a gallon intervals. When we used 1/10 of a gallon intervals, we found that our instantaneous rate of fuel consumption was between 36 and 48 miles per gallon. It is worth noting that, in this case, the best choice for a range of possible values for our instantaneous rate is between 48 miles per gallon and 38 miles per gallon. So, we can combine these to get our most accurate approximation of the instantaneous fuel economy right at the 0.2 of a gallon mark.